Well, good morning, everyone. I don't know why, but that song just came to me and kept insisting that we needed it today. So I think it's because it isn't easy. It isn't easy being Green. It isn't easy being Linda. It isn't easy being Tom. It isn't easy being Jeff. You know, especially when we think that we're supposed to be doing some great thing, somehow making a difference in the world and accomplishing things, you know, that why am I here on this earth when all I'm doing is raising kids or working or, you know, raking the yard or what, you know, it seems like some of those tasks are just so mundane and so worthless that it's kind of like, wow, I'm never going to amount to anything. I'm never going to be something different like red or orange or you know, important somehow. I'm never going to bring peace to the world. And part of what I have to deal with as your Unity licensed teacher and prayer chaplain coordinator is just listening to people and listening to stories and hearing all kinds of wonderings and worries and concerns. And you know where I've decided a lot of that stuff comes from our own judgments and our misperceptions, our misunderstandings. What we've heard before is judgments can be blocks to the awareness of love's presence. And so I brought down from the balcony or the halfway point between the balcony and downstairs, this piece of artwork that was created by Pamela Peabody and gifted to the church. Now, many of you may have not ever gotten to experience Pam's love, but she was disabled, but managed to get her radiate love to everyone who walked in the church. And she'd hand out bulletins and give hugs. And she did that to the very best of her ability. She was she was one of the few people I know in Unity of Missoula who was raised in Unity. So very unusual person. Well, when we got this piece of artwork, it came for her memorial service, and her kids decided they were going to take it home because after all, it was a piece of Pam and it was dear to Pam's heart. And I will admit, I said, oh, thank God they're taking it home. I don't know what we're going to do with it. I don't like it very well. You know, my judgments came out. And somebody else looked at it and says, oh, good grief, that looks like a demon. And I went, oh yeah, that's, you know, there's something in the sparkling green eyes that look kind of weird. But, you know, the more I thought about it, the more I realized this is my projection and my judgment, and I am closing my mind to the love that Pam had and gave to all of us. And that instead of wanting to do away with this piece of artwork, maybe it's time that we celebrate it and just give thanks for the unique gifts that come through our doors every week. We are so blessed with just so many talents. And sometimes they get hidden behind judgments and misunderstandings. A long time ago, we had a retired Unity minister who said in the old days, Unity would never have let anybody like Pam be a greeter or anybody who didn't sing perfectly or play the piano perfectly, could not participate in a Sunday service. And if you had a little cold or a cough, you were not welcome to be the service coordinator. That we needed to project this air of professionalism in all that we do, because otherwise unity doesn't get any respect. And I am happy to say that that has not been my mindset very often. Occasionally, I let it take control, but for the most part, I think we at Unity of Missoula really try to be an open and accessible community and welcome people no matter where they are. The words for today were world peace. And I thought about that long and hard because, yeah, indeed, if not by letting go of our judgments and our misperceptions, how do we bring about peace in this world? Paul Hasselbeck, who was one of the main teachers at Unity Worldwide Ministries when I attended classes there, and does an amazing job with metaphysics and Bible teachings and 12 powers and so forth. He likes to rewrite the Unity word for the day in different words, slightly different words. And so I thought I would read his writings for today. I live my vision for a peaceful world. To bring about peace in the world, I focus my attention to my first reaction when I feel I have been treated unfairly. I do not deny my feelings, but neither do I allow anger, envy, or other negative feelings to take control of my response. I feel my feelings as I remain committed to living the truth I know. Regardless of behavior, every person is fully divine, expressing their humanity from their divinity. I draw upon my divine faculties of love, faith, strength, and the principle of peace to guide my next steps. No matter how another responds, I remain ever centered in my inherent divinity. My efforts make a difference. Peace between individuals creates peace within families, in communities, and among the nations of the world. I live my vision for a peaceful world. So as I prepared for this talk today, I spent a lot of time reviewing Myrtle Fillmore's teachings and writings. I got sidetracked from what I really wanted to say and just delved deeply into Myrtle Fillmore. And I pulled out a book that we were gifted a couple of years ago when we went to the Fillmore Festival at Unity Village, Myrtle Fillmore Lighting the Way. And it's the story of Myrtle Fillmore's life by Neil Volley. He says at the beginning of the book, or in the introduction to the book, he talks about the early 20th century produced only a handful of strong women who created impact on society in America. Those strong women include Clara Barton, who founded the Red Cross, Susan B. Anthony, who, as we all know, pushed for women's suffrage successfully eventually, Mary Baker Eddy, who founded Christian Science, and Frances E. Willard, the Women's Christian Temperance Society. We need to add Myrtle Fillmore to this list, as she was the co-founder of Unity School and really the basis for Silent Unity, the 24/7 prayer ministry of Unity. She began praying for others. She and her husband invited a small group of people to join them in their living room in Kansas City, and they'd meet nightly and pray for others who would send in letters. And Myrtle's healing prayers were so successful that they began getting hundreds of letters from people all over the country asking for prayer support. There were amazing healings. And by the time of her death in 1931, she had actually employed 90 workers, prayer workers, who were responding to 220,000 prayer requests a year. And this was in Kansas City. Silent Unity continued after her death, and eventually there are more than 300 prayer workers working every day, and they're handling over 1,300,000 prayer requests annually. She and her workers called this absent healing, because you don't have to do it in the presence of the person that you're healing, that you do it by going into the silence, going within yourself, into the divinity of yourself. And when I do prayers daily, I always like to just imagine that the light that is me is lighting the corresponding divinity in the person that I'm praying for. And that whatever their need may be, God knows what it is. I don't know what it is, and I'm not going to put words to it. I like to picture the person if I know them, but that's not necessary, because the light, the divinity from within is what's important. I really love reading about Myrtle Fillmore. This book just really lit a fire in me to reread it and learn more about it. And her founding of Unity is based on her understanding and Charles's understanding that of a way of looking at Christianity that is radically different from the traditional Christianity as was practiced in her time, and is, of course, still being practiced today. She believed that the divine existed within all men and women, that viewing God as the indwelling presence within all is what's important. And this is rather than an all-powerful external being out there who should be worshiped. She saw that Jesus was a highly evolved human being, conscious of this indwelling presence within himself, and he set an example for humankind. He did not come down to us from heaven to save and redeem humankind from sin. Instead, he said, all these things I do, you too shall do, and greater, and greater. Here's one of the replies to prayer that Myrtle wrote. She wrote, the book is based on over 1,500 letters that she wrote that were preserved in the last, I think, 7 or so years of her life. So she said to someone who had written, asking for prayers, I have put you right in my heart, the warmest place I have, so I may bless you with my heart's love, which is really God's love, expressing through me as a channel. She also said, the really important thing is to lift the consciousness above all the things of the material world, above personality and human limitations, and to unfold the Christ consciousness. So where we are able to see the perfect image and likeness of all people. And I think, again, that's a guiding light for all of us. When we are having problems with somebody, we're condemning someone, we don't want to have anything to do with someone, we really need to stop and think again about our reactions. In the book, Adventures in Resilience by Sharon Connors, She talks about her friend Sally, who hated her mother and couldn't be in the same room with her anymore. Her tender heart, Sally's tender heart, had been deeply hurt as a child by the things her mother said and did. Her mother was a brilliant nurse who had become a drug addict. Growing up, Sally didn't realize that her mother was an addict. What she did realize was that her mother's behavior was terribly erratic, so much so that she never wanted to bring any friends home. As a child, Sally often had to prepare meals and care for her younger brother. Each year, her resentment grew. When I met Sally, her resentment was so intense she could barely speak to her mother without becoming enraged. The thought of loving her mother seemed impossible. She didn't even want to try. Forgiveness seemed not only impossible, but undesirable. I think that's where some of us get sometimes is, I can't love that person. It's not even desirable to love him or her or whoever. Sally's horizons began to close in on her until the pain of unforgiveness and resentment were worse than the idea of actually forgiving her mom and releasing the resentment. She became willing to pray for her mother, wishing her mom all the good things she wished for herself. And I think right there is just the willingness to maybe see things differently, the willingness to ask for love to come into the picture, even when you don't feel like you're capable of doing that. The miracle happened only a few months later. She told me one day, I talked to my mom today and felt compassion for her. Sally's willingness to forgive her mom opened the door for the power of divine love to be activated in her. She began to know of new freedom and peace as a result. As Erasmus said, bidden or not bidden, God is present. So do not think so much about receiving love. This again is Myrtle Fillmore, as you do about expressing love. All people respond to love as a flower responds to sunshine. As sunshine brings out the colors and beauty, so the light of love brings out Christ's virtues in people. So love, love, love. That's all there is. So the other author that I've really liked through the years, and I've talked about him often, is Hugh Prather. And he's written lots of books, notes to myself and notes on how to live in the world and still be happy, and a marriage counseling book that I've recommended for a lot of people. Trying to remember the name of it, but anyway, he talks about our greatest challenges sometimes is the relationships we have with the people who are very closest to us, because somehow we feel that those people that are closest to us should know and understand us exactly as we are and appreciate us and show us that appreciation in ways that we can identify with and that we need. And they should be able to do this without us telling them, which is always very interesting because it doesn't always work that way, I'm afraid. So anyway, Hugh Prather left the world suddenly, unexpectedly. I think he was like 48 or 52, something like that. He and his wife had written books pretty much together. They had a really interesting relationship in that they met each other, went on a date, and 2 weeks later got married. And he details this in one of his books about the challenges they had with that relationship for many, many years. needless to say, when they got back from eloping and getting married, she got out of the car and said, just because we're married doesn't entitle you to have any access to my body. Goodbye. Slammed the door and went into her apartment and left him. So they didn't, I think it was 2 weeks later or more before they decided, well, maybe since they were married, maybe they ought to try to work things out a little bit. But it was a really interesting up and down relationship for a long time. And Hugh talks about he really blamed himself because he was very selfish, very self-centered, very macho. And Gail put up with a lot, he said. Gail just really loved him in spite of himself. And she had made a commitment to be with him no matter what, no matter how bad things got. And so eventually he became sober. He discovered A Course in Miracles. He discovered his spiritual side. He made a commitment that because they were married and because he really truly loved her and she loved him, he was going to try to be the best person he could be and to love her in return. So they actually formed a marriage counseling service, and they did all kinds of workshops on how to heal relationships and wrote books together, as I say, though her name never appeared on the books. She said early on they decided that it would be best if it was his voice that came through the book. And while she did editing and made changes and suggestions, it was always his name on the books. Well, in 2012, I think it was, or 2011, they had just finished writing this book and editing it. And she went to run errands, and Hugh decided it was time for to relax and went and sat in the hot tub. They live in Taos, New Mexico. And somehow while she was gone, he passed away. So she came home and found his dead body in the hot tub, which must have been horrendous, of course. Well, several months later, after all of the stuff that she had to do, she took the book that they'd written. She finally felt ready to send it to the publisher that normally published their books. And the publisher looked at it and returned it and said, this doesn't work for us at this time. I'm sorry, we're not going to do this book. And so she gave it up. She said, yeah, okay, guess it's not to be. Well, 10 years later, out of the blue, she gets an email from a man who'd attended one of their workshops or seminars and was so impressed with what she and Hugh were teaching that he emailed her. He found her email address and emailed her and said, by the way, is there anything that Hugh wrote that never got published? And she said, well, yeah, as a matter of fact. So she and this man worked together, re-edited the book and sent it off and got accepted to be published. So the book's title is Gently Down This Dream. No. And he loved the song, Row, Row, Row Your Boat. In fact, he asked for it to be played at his memorial service, and they played and sang, Row, Row, Row Your Boat. Tom and I have joked often that's what we wanted our memorial service. Row, row, row your boat. Because after all, it's three. Oh, it's just got to be easy. We got to go with the flow, go down the stream. So I'm just so reminded of, our way of putting obstacles to love in our paths. our way of using judgments and misunderstandings, misconceptions, just to block the fact that when we're really in touch with our inner divinity, we can flow gently down the stream. We don't have to fight. We don't have to, say a billion affirmations and charge all around the world to discover what it is in our own backyard. David MacArthur many years ago inspired me and other people in the Sunday audience by telling us, exactly where you are is where you're supposed to be. Doing exactly what you're doing is your ministry. That this is what God wants you to do. The people that you connect with, your children, your husband, your wife, your partner, your whatever, are the people that you need to connect with. That is your ministry. Maybe it's your landlord. Maybe it's your boss. Maybe it's, the kid next door that goes screaming out the front door every day to school that pushes all your buttons, whoever it is. Maybe it's a child of yours that's grown up to say, well, Mom, you just don't know anything. I think you're really obsessive compulsive because you want me to clean up before I leave the house. all those things. Maybe it's a spouse who's decided to be a vegan and it pushes your buttons. Maybe it's, there's a billion reasons why we're justified in being upset and angry. So Hugh has a wonderful story about a pet cat. And I don't know about you guys, but we have a psycho cat that lives at our house. He likes to get come into our room at midnight, just when we're nicely sound asleep, and jump around and scratch on the window shades and try to get out the window, which of course he can't do, but, and yowl and just create a ruckus. And I won't tell you how many times we've talked about getting rid of the cat, probably way more. And I keep saying, no, we can't get rid of the cat. But anyway, this story is by Hugh and Gail. This is inspired by Binkley. He has become my kitty muse. Binkley is a 12-year-old gray tabby. Our son John rescued him from his college dorm in the sense that he caught him and told us that we were to take care of him. At the time, we had two other beloved pets, a Siamese named KJ and a Shih Tzu Chihuahua mix named Chocolate Mousse Pie. Both were characters. KJ would steal any workman's tools, steal Gail's mom's brassieres and other odds and ends and hide them in his lair. And Moose had a vocabulary of snorts, sneezes, coughs, and barks that kept us all laughing. Then Binkley arrived. We took him to a vet to get checked out, and Binkley bit her. And he has bitten every other vet we have since gotten. We now have to tranquilize him before we take him to the vet. When strangers come over, Binkley slyly sneaks up and nips them on their legs until they pet him. His sneakiness is ingenious, executed through a series of slow stretches and rolls. Knowing we will put him up as soon as someone comes over, Binkley has mastered the hidden ambush. The older we get, the more successful this out of sight, out of mind tactic has become. To this day, Binkley has never learned to use a litter box. He gets in it, but hangs his backside out the opening. He never grooms himself. He shreds rugs and furniture. He frequently eats too fast and throws up. And if we are headed in the direction of the kitchen, he runs between our legs and tries to trip us. Our floors are tile. But our biggest test came when Binkley would go after KG, the cat. Even though this only happened every month or two, it was so distressing to our family that we ended up keeping the cats in separate parts of the house. Needless to say, Binkley didn't become the favorite family pet. Animals often supply pet owners with what might be called the preschool level of learning how to walk a spiritual path. One could say that infants provide the kindergarten level of spiritual learning, but in both cases, the opportunity to express a very direct and simple form of love is undeniable. Kittens and puppies, as well as cats and dogs, are so obviously innocent that few people can avoid seeing that the nature of the relationship lies entirely in their hands. We are there to give. They are there to receive. Finding ourselves in a situation that demands pure giving and choosing to carry out that demand day in and day out imparts a miracle. So they finally got to the point where they recognized that that's what they had to do with Binkley, to practice unconditional, unlimited love for Binkley. He says, God is love. And I believe that our one function in life is to represent God's love. The most powerful way to do this is to hold people in our prayers, but there is a loving way to do almost anything. Once we acknowledged our less than sensitive patterns with animals, we resolved to give all of our future pets as much love and care as possible and to make a lifelong commitment to each one. Which brings me back to Binkley. After a few adjustments, such as finding a safe way to walk toward the kitchen, we were left with the bundle of traits already described, plus one more that is immensely important. Binkley, like most cats, loves to be petted. As an added bonus, since he has a year-round fast-growing undercoat that requires daily brushing, he also likes to be groomed. So Binkley is one of the ways Gail and I practice this pure and simple form of love. One of the first things we do in the morning and the last things we do at night is simply to love Binkley. Binkley, it turns out, can count to 2. So he loudly lets us know if one of us has forgotten to take the turn petting and grooming him. I mentioned pets as preschool. For me, it works this way. As I pet and groom Binkley, I say to myself, God is love. I am here to represent God's love for you. And I try to focus on just one thought, petting Binkley as I imagine God would pet Binkley. And if my thoughts wander, I bring them back to love. And so Binkley has managed to make his way into being that channel of love. I read someplace recently that when we pet our cats, our dogs, our pets, that we're really releasing the chemical oxytocin, that the hormone that gives us pleasure. And the cat or the dog is definitely feeling that too. And so I thought we'd focus on one of my favorite lessons from A Course in Miracles for our meditation today. And just to rest in that love, that feeling of happiness. So just take a moment, and if you have a pet, or even if you don't have a pet, just imagine, perhaps you can imagine being stroked as God would stroke you in a loving way. The lesson is God, being love, is also happiness. God, being love, is also happiness. Happiness is an attribute of love. It cannot be apart from it. nor can it be experienced where love is not. Love has no limits, being everywhere. And therefore, joy is everywhere as well. We breathe into that space in our hearts, that place of safety and peace and love. Knowing indeed this is the truth of who we are. This is the place of our divine connection. This is the place of safety and love. If it helps you to imagine that there is light at the center of you, I know this is the truth. We can vision that light reaching out from our heart space and connecting with all the lights and all the people in this room. Unity of Missoula, the building just shines with this divine light. I've been told people who vision things can sometimes see an angel perched on top of this building. I think it's a collection of all the love that resides in this, right here. We welcome all the happiness that love brings as truth replaces fear and joy becomes what we expect. We let this joy take the place of pain, knowing indeed God, being love, is also happiness. God, being love, is also happiness. And so this happiness is given to each one of you as you return to that place of love within. God, being love, is also happiness. And it is happiness I seek. I cannot fail because I seek the truth. I cannot fail because I seek the truth. God, and being love, is also happiness. So breathe one more time and bring this feeling of peace and joy and comfort up into this world right here, right now. Knowing indeed, as you open your eyes, that we can see the happiness and the love that shines forth from every single person we connect with. Thank you so much. So we'll close with our prayer for protection. If you'd like, you can, let's just sit for the prayer for protection, and then we'll stand and sing our song. Is it? Yep. If you're not familiar with it, it's up on the wall. So let's pray together. The light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. The presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is, and all is well. And so let's stand now and form our circle of love, and we'll sing our peace song. We have to stretch a little bit, it looks like, but that's okay. Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me. Let there let peace begin with me. Let this be the moment down. We stay all day. It's me. And so as we leave today, there is 2 different kinds of soup downstairs and some bread that Rob Hollings had baked for us. So we need to go enjoy bread and soup and some cake or cupcakes. And while we're doing that, I'm going to use one Bible quote because we can't have a Sunday talk without a Bible quote. It's required. So the quote is, "Love one another as I have loved you," from John chapter 13, verse 34. And while you're busy loving one another, don't forget to have fun. Thank you.